be to set the cadence for this live stream. Now this time I mean what I'm saying. I don't anticipate for this live stream to be long at all. Not long at all. Very short and brief. But it is very informative. Don't mean any harm. I hear you. I hear you. I understand. I understand, you know, the world, people, life. So, I get over it. And so, we're at the 12-minute mark. So I'm going to begin to read. And I'll try to make it make sense. A little later on in this live stream. Oh, I didn't finish my thought. Now, what I'm going to read is, again, my move to try to write my first book. And it was too long and drawn out. It was getting on my nerves. So the structure of the wording, the whole thing is not going to move forward like a professional book reading at all. But it can begin, like, again, my outline is, it can commence this live stream. And then I'm going to just try to fill in the gaps. But you should get the gist of this secret message by the end of this live stream. And so I'm going to begin to read. And remember, you must be of what? A mature mindset to hear this message, because it can be emotionally destabilizing. Let's see. Uh-oh, I hope I didn't hit something. Okay. Oh, wow. Let me put this in. This is garbage. The title of my book was going to be, and will be if I move forward and write it. It is called The Blur. The Blur. B-L-U-R. Let me stop. And what I want to say is, as I'm reading, I'm not going to try to explain what I'm reading. I will try to explain it near the end of the read. So, I guess the first chapter would be called The Blueprint. And it says, did you know the rapture spoken about in some churches commenced on May 16th, 2018, when Uranus moved into Taurus for the first time in 84 years. This planetary alignment last occurred in the mid-1930s in the midst of the Great Depression. The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, lasting from the stock market crash of 1929 to 1930. I should have said quote. The Great Depression was the worst economic downturn in the history of the industrialized world, lasting from the stock market crash of 1929 to 1939. And I quoted that from history.com. It was published October 2019. I continue to read. Over that 10-year period, an abnormally large percentage of the United States population struggled to meet the demands of life. Many people, even families, were without the bare necessities like food, shelter, warmth, and clothing. A lack of job opportunities, low wages, and rising prices led to tremendous financial difficulties. The hardship was so stressful that many chose to numb the psychological pain through substance abuse. Others just killed themselves. In the same year, several strategies were launched in an attempt to offset some of the growing crisis, like homelessness and substance abuse. In response to these growing social issues, New York developed the first public housing project, and Ohio formed the first Alcoholics Anonymous support group. Put in a nutshell, 84 years ago, when Uranus was last in Taurus, the The world, whether directly or indirectly, experienced tremendous economic, social, and psychological turmoil due to the fall of the established structure. I hope y'all can hear me clear. And that's another thing. My eyes bother me from so much reading. I continue to read. The social, political, and economic framework of that time that governed the people and their lives was what were intentionally sabotaged by those that held political and economic power. These particular people that I will refer to from here on out are the elite. The elite class held various prominent positions in society. Prior to the Great Depression, the elitists joined forces. The purpose of the collaboration was to execute a plan that ensured their bloodline remained economically and politically affluent for generations to come, as well as their core philosophical viewpoints. These prestigious people were the most privileged and educated people of that period, while the majority of the remaining population were uneducated about the advanced aspects of life, like expanding business and true spirituality and the scrupulous nature of man. So, most people during that time had little to no discernment and were unknowing victims to the abrupt dismantling of their governing systems, and were stunned as the result of the sudden decline in their ability to sustain their physical worldly security. A significant education for basic people was rare. Therefore, most lacked the intellectual capacity to have foreseen what was coming their way. And when the devastating situations and circumstances were in motion, they still had no idea from where it had come, and no notion about how to overcome it. They were just left to blow in the whims of the elitists. While the elites sat in secure seats of social and political power, they were quickly being raptured into generational security, wealth, and power by implementing their plan to intertwine fundamental industries coast to coast like a rat king, forming an unbreakable economic monopoly. Still reading, but let me take a pause so you understand what I'm reading. Again, I began to write the secret message out in order to publish a book with the secret information. I'm not built to write a book, so I backed down, at least for now. Then I decided, due to my ego, that I was going to create a private video for those that supported me. I did battle with myself. I have right now I'm victorious over my ego, so I've decided to stop making my late August videos and to share the secret message. And so what I'm doing is writing out reading out my draft that reveals the secret message. And so thus far, what have I talked about? I talked about the rapture. The rapture's relative to the church, and I'll go into that. And I talked about how the rapture commenced on May 16th of 2018 when Uranus entered into Taurus. I also talked about how Uranus transit is 84 years. It takes 84 years for the planet Uranus to orbit the sun. 84 whole years. So the last time This particular astrological alignment, that is Uranus in Taurus, occurred 84 years ago. And 84 years ago was in the mid-30s during the Great Depression. And so I'm pointing out, if you pay attention, that Uranus in Taurus 84 years ago was accompanied by the Great Depression. We'll go into that a little further. I talked about the general populace response to the breakdown in their social structure during the Great Depression. It led people to use alcohol and things like that, drugs and alcohol. And during that time period, the first AA was set up to try to offset, the negatives, the ills that were occurring due to the economic hardship. I also talked about how the state of New York set up the first public housing to do what? Offset all of the people that were becoming homeless due to the economic collapse of the 1930s. What else have I covered? I talked about how during that time period it was not common for people to have an extensive education, and therefore their intellectual capacity was limited. But there were a particular group of people that I call the elitists that were privileged, that were educated. And those educated people intentionally crashed the economy for a purpose, and we'll go into that a little later. I ended the reading talking about how the common man and woman were just left in hardship, while the elitists ensured their seats of economic, social, and political power. So I continue to read. The last sentence that I read was that they, the elitists, were quickly being raptured into generational security, wealth, and power by implementing their plan to intertwine fundamental industries coast to coast like a rat king, forming an unbreakable economic monopoly. I go on and I write, with that being said, did you know that the game Monopoly was manufactured and sold in the same period? The manufacturing and selling of the game Monopoly was a slap in the face to the consumer, to the people, as the gist of the game revealed the primary reason for the economic collapse and the people's soul-shaking hardship. The strategy of the game Monopoly is to buy as much prime real estate in key spaces around the board. The player does this the player that does this quickly and accurately will monopolize the board, and the deed holder will bankrupt the rest of the players. Another notable feature that can be helpful to the strongest player is a chance card that reads, go directly to jail, do not pass go, do not collect $200. This instruction card can be detrimental to a struggling player, as it hinders them from advancing in the game until they successfully roll a double or pull a get out of jail free card. It also prevents them from obtaining additional funds that may otherwise keep them in the game. The aforementioned game plan is an example of the blueprint used to destabilize the society at that time, freeing the elitists up to effortlessly reign. Since their administration was unsupervised, it allowed them to corner markets, secure prime real estate, fund corporations, and to industrialize various industries. As for the layperson, They were financially stonewalled through low wages that were exhausted by the astronomical cost of living. Even if someone even if someone realized the stealth dealings, it didn't matter, as they had no money to invest in the realty exchange and broad industrial renaissance. Broadening industrial renaissance. Now, what was I just saying? Kind of highlighting the last part. I'm saying that when Uranus was last in Taurus in the mid-1930s, the people in the United States primarily dealt with some soul-shaking financial hardship that they tried to escape through alcoholism and drugs. Many people went homeless, they didn't have food, etc., etc. All of that took place because of those that were affluent at that time, or were privileged, the elitists. They intentionally destabilized the economy in order to reset and to bring about a new renaissance during that period. I talked about the game Monopoly in detail because the actual blueprint or the gist of the game Monopoly is the exact blueprint the elitists used during that time period, during the 1930s, last time Uranus was in Taurus, to destabilize the economy and lead the people to what? That soul-shaking financial hardship. And it also allowed those elitists, those that were privileged, to buy prime real estate and to be industrialize various industries and to establish new corporations, etc., etc. And there was no resistance. When, ooh, come on in here. Put it right there. You my best friend. Right there on that ledge. Thank you, you sweetheart. How are you this evening?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm hanging. So, now at this time, I'm just going to talk a little more in detail about this Uranian energy, because it has been prevalent throughout the history of mankind. Currently, Uranus is in Taurus. And remember, Uranus moved into Taurus on May 16th of this year. Was it this year? Of 2018, originally, like a year ago. And so I want to add more details about this astrological energy. We know the influence of the 1930s. Now I'm going to look at prior historical influences of that same astrological alignment of Uranus and Taurus. We already know, again, in the 1930s it was the Great Depression. 84 years before that was 1851. And what took place of importance during 1851, it was the Great Exhibition, the Great Exhibition of the works of industry of all nations. Now I'm not going to go into great detail about what that actually is. Feel free to research it. But in short, it was like a fair in which the creme de la creme of the world came to share their inventions and things like that, like a place to share the harnessing of electricity and light bulbs and things like that. That was a place like Tesla would have visited. And it was for all industries, from scientific, everything. It came mathematics, anything somebody invented or discovered, they brought to this fair. And so that took place in 1851. And we'll talk about why that is important to our current timeline. 84 years before that, in 1767, it was the American Revolution. And the American Revolution actually took place between 1763 and 1781. And during that time, there were there was colonizing, and there were, we could say, territorial wars brought on by the colonists. It was also the Stamp Act and the what was it, the Stamp Act, the Tea Act of that time period. And it was okay, got these broken glasses. Oh, it was a time period in which the colonists went up against, I believe, Great Britain, because they felt like they were being taxed over here in the United States, but over there with the Parliament, they had no representation. And so that's what took place during the Uranus and Taurus period. Why are these dates significant? It is because this planetary alignment that I'm speaking about, Uranus and Taurus, is where we are now. Those things that happened in the past, things similar will happen this time around. And so, with that being said, the great exhibition of works of industry of all nations immediately lets us know that there are new inventions and discoveries that are being introduced and will be revealed in times to come. I'll try to talk about that. The next thing we learned from the past is that the American Revolution took place, and it was about colonization. And if you really pay attention to my new way of doing things, and when I say a new way of doing things, what do I mean? An example is that during the Industrial Revolution, that was the time period in which the I always forget what it's called, the factory line, the curvator belt, whatever it was invented. And so it industrialized industries like, for example, the big three, Ford, General Motors, etc., etc. But not limited to those places, but those are primary examples. And so that's what the Industrial Revolution lets us know. It lets us know that there is going to be changes to, like, taxes and different things like that, as far as, you know, political parts. And then 84 years before 1776 was 1683. What happened in the year of 1683? Something that is most likely relevant is that Germantown, PA was founded. Germantown, PA was founded because it was what? Colonized. There was a time period of territory assignments, like big game realty, we could say. 84 years before that was 84 years before that was 1599. 84 years before 1599 was 1514. What was going on? There were many wars, war campaigns for what? Territory, to claim territory and to colonize. And I just want to go a little bit more into Uranus so that you understand how Uranus transits the sun. Is it glitching? Yeah, stream resumed. Isn't that something? I ain't gonna worry about it. Keep moving. Before Uranus made it into Taurus, it visited first Pisces, and it had its meaning, and then it went into Aries, and it had its astrological meaning, its significance into this physical world. And now that it's in Taurus, it has a meaning. And so right now I kind of want to talk about the meaning of each of those astrological alignments. When Uranus was in Pisces, Uranus represents the sudden, shocking opportunities that allow a person to be enlightened so that they can update or make changes. You just become aware. And Pisces represents the end game, the finalization, you know, those kind of things. And so Uranus and Pisces talks about the moment that um, humanity was sparked to become aware that an old way or old paradigm or old ways of doing things was soon drawing to an end. Then when Uranus moved into Aries, Uranus, remember, is the sudden enlightenment. It's the light bulb on top of the head. It's the genius. It's becoming aware. It's transcending this realm in order to move forward and to begin to create or manifest. So Uranus and Taurus energy immediately lets us know that something is being created, is beginning to manifest into this physical world. Then there is where we are now, Uranus and Taurus, is where those realizations are realized. They are manifested in the world. Now, once Uranus enters into any sign, it has this period in which it goes into that sign, visits that sign, lays its essence down, then goes back into the sign it just left, and stays there for a brief while before moving back forward into its upcoming sign that it had priorly visited. And so when the time period came that Uranus originally came into Taurus on May 16th, 2018, stayed there for just a little while to begin to reveal to us the manifestations that are a part of our new paradigm, the new things, the new way of doing things. Then it briefly retrograded and went back into the sign before it that it had just left, which is Aries. And it asks humanity, now that you see what you are creating in your physical realm, now that you see what you are manifesting in your realm, now that you're beginning to see what your new paradigm will look like, are you sure you want to move forward? It gives us this time to adjust ourselves if we do not want to. That's what Uranus allows a person to do, adjust, to update. Obviously, we've chosen to progress in the course of action that, we've been on. Uranus turns back and goes back into Taurus where it is now. From, let me see the date. From, as of March 7th of this year, March 7th of 2019, Uranus came back into Taurus. So from that time period, which is March 7th, 2019, we will begin to see accelerated changes to our reality. Our new paradigm is being constructed. Now, one of the astrological signs that I didn't write down because I didn't plan to talk about in too much detail has to do with Capricorn and Saturn being there, as well as Pluto, and also I think was it Neptune or something like that. That planetary aspect right there, alignment, lets us know that an old paradigm or the old structure is being destroyed. It is being broken down. Uranus in Taurus lets us know the details about what's being constructed in this new paradigm. Lost my line of thought right quick. I'll think of it. And so, how can I just kind of sum that up? To reiterate that Uranus and Taurus, that same planetary alignment that existed, that occurred back in the mid-1930s during the Great Depression, that occurred in 1851 during the Great Exhibition of the Works of Industry, that also occurred in 1767 during the Great Revolution, and in 1683 when territorial assignment or colonization was taking place. and even 84 years before that, when there were many wars fought for the purpose of colonization, that we're back in that under that particular astrological energy. Now, I'm going to jump temporarily to this other part of the book I was trying to write. Remember, it wasn't a successful task, but who knows? And so it's not a smooth transition from, I'll say, one chapter to the next. But I'm reading in order to help you be able to see what will soon take place for humanity. This is the secret message. We can say here the second chapter is called Religious Doctrine. And it says, in North America, some millenarian teachings prophesied the rapture, or the transporting of believers to heaven at the second coming of Christ. And I quote that from Oxford Online. Although the term rapture specifically is not stated in the King James Version Bible, there are multiple verses that suggest an event will take place precisely as mentioned above. And the term rapture seems to sum up the prophesied event in one word. While suggestive verses like, quoting from the Bible, "Then we which are alive and remain shall be caught up together with them in the clouds to meet the Lord in the air. And so shall we ever be with the Lord." And that was 1 Thessalonians chapter 4, verse 17. Or the verse, "Two women shall be grinding at the mill, the one shall be taken and the other left." That's Matthew chapter 24, verse 41. These scriptures offer proof of the prophesied event to come. Moreover, those that acknowledge the idea of the rapture have been impacted psychologically, as they feverishly presume there will be a severing of the unrighteous human from God. In addition, they await the event with hopeful and confident anticipation. They will be one of the taken. The aforementioned ideology, summed up in the term rapture, is not grounded in rationale, as the word rapture is simply defined as a feeling or intense pleasure or joy. That is by Oxford Online as well. The feeling of pleasure and the emotion of joy are physical experiences that a person has as a result of taking part in what fulfills their desire. Humans are subject to a host of subconscious drives that demand to be pacified. The primary drives associated with being in the human condition are hunger, thirst, breathing, sleep to awake cycle, the need to urinate and to defecate, as well as a unique assortment of urges like longings, passion, and desire. Withstanding the instinctual bodily functions to focus on the stated urges, a person's ability or inability and means of pacifying their urges are analyzed through the second house placement in all relative aspects in the field of astrology. The second house in astrology is occupied by the zodiac sign Taurus, and the sign of Taurus is governed by planet Venus. The second house is like an inventory list of the things a person presumes will pacify their physical, worldly wants, needs, desires, and urges, both tangible and intangible, such as material goods, or just the I wrote that wrong. Or an appealing partner, or a appealing potential partner, and of course, so much more. A person's ability or inability to pacify their physical worldly wants, needs, and desires and urges have a tremendous impact upon their sense of self-worth, physical comfort, and security, and ultimately their deepest inner emotional state or their psyche, and therefore their soul. Now that was my attempt to write the book, but that kind of laid the framework for this live stream. As mentioned, I was going to entitle my book, and if I do write it, it will be called The Blur, B-L-U-R. And why have I chosen to entitle my book on the subject matter that will be discussed during this live stream, The Blur? It is because information comes to people from so many different directions until it's all blurred in. A couple of sources in which I personally received information from was from religion, the religious doctrine. When I was in the church, the religious doctrine that I was up under talked about the rapture, and it talked about being left behind. There was even a series of books and movies called Left Behind that dealt with the rapture, dealt with those people that were faith-filled being raptured up with the Lord before all hell breaks loose on this earth. And those that left behind would be left to the volatile circumstances and situations due to not having faith. And recently, I came to see that doctrine about being raptured or being left behind, I saw it through a blurred filter or lens. I finally came to understand that to be raptured is to be caught up in a time period in which the Renaissance is taking place. Just as those elitists did in the 1930s during the Great Depression. They were raptured into the new Renaissance. They actually ushered it in. And they rolled that, I'll say, proverbial wave into social, and political, and economic stability, while the rest of the people were left behind, suffering, choosing to numb their psychological pain through drugs and alcohol, and some even couldn't take it, and they ended their lives. They were left behind. Right now, at this point on the timeline of humanity, we are up under that same astrological umbrella. A time period in which our powers that be, our elitists, have set up a plan in order to destabilize the economy, to crash the economy. And before I go forward, I'm going to read some of the other notes that I had written in preparation to continue to write my book that right now I'm going to do. So I'm just going to read these little loose notes here, and then I'll go back into explaining the secret that actually has been right before our eyes. And I'm doing so to make sure that you, viewer, know what is soon to occur. So if you can prepare. Let's see, which one should I read first? I'll read this because I think I just stated it. Have laugh. Hello, how are you? Welcome here. Um, I thank you for dropping by. You're new. I hope you browse my channel. If you like what you see, like. If you really like what you see, subscribe. Share me with someone else and hit that bell so you can be notified whenever I go live. And tap the thumb up. Did I already say that? If you're interested in ordering your own personal tarot reading, my name is Nancy. Contact me at my email. My email is canangelsfly at gmail.com. Canangelsfly1 at gmail.com. And tonight, I'm doing a live to reveal a secret message. And so right now, I'm just reading the loose notes that I had began to jot down in order to help me compose my book that I decided not to move forward and write right now anyway. And so this note here, let's see how it fits in. It says, what does it mean to be raptured? Looking through the filter of astrology, it means that a person has successfully made the leap from the old paradigm or the old way of doing things, as well as have relinquished old social standards and norms, embracing and accepting the prevalent doctrines, ideologies, and lines of reasoning. That went to something else, okay? That's cool. Ooh. I'm wondering about my dad who passed away. Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Have a laugh, but that I'm not reading tarot cards tonight. Again, thank you for dropping by. Reading additional notes that were jotted down. Presently, Uranus is in the sign Taurus. Uranus returned to Taurus on March 7, 2019. I already shared that. And will continue to transit until July 7th, 2025. Let me stop there. Today is, I think, August 2019. August 2019. This astrological alignment of Uranus and Taurus that this has been all about thus far will continue to transit that zodiac sign. Uranus will continue to transit that zodiac sign for the next 6 years. So some of what we're going to talk about is going to cover the next 6 years. Pay attention, because it's giving dates and periods for certain things to happen. And one of them is for the greatest depression that ever existed to occur. Get prepared. Anyway, let's see. July July 2007 or 2025, 6 years from now, and beyond, is humanity's manifested destiny. Or it will be a period of recognizable economic hardship. It is also a period that fully ushers in the new paradigm. I want to stop because I need to parallel what I just read to what happened in the 1930s when Uranus was in Taurus, just like it is now. There was a period that existed in the past in which the economy was destabilized. Between now and 2025, the economy will destabilize quite similar to the level that it did during the Great Depression back in the 1930s. While the destabilization was taking place, a new social structure was being organized by those elitists behind the scenes. The same thing is taking place now. The new world order that is synonymous with the church will be established at the close of 2025. At the close of 2025, Uranus will continue to move forward, and it will go into the sign of Gemini. In astrology, Gemini occupies the third house, and the third house represents our immediate environment and all that you have to engage in order to move forth through life. There will be abrupt and sudden changes to one's reality, just like it was for those laymen and women back during the Great Depression. Their soul-shaking experience was, to them, seemed abrupt and sudden, and it didn't make sense. If a person today and beyond ignores all of the clues and all of the information that is being submitted to them from various sources, they too, when this manifest destiny presents itself, it is obvious. It will seem abrupt to them, sudden, and it won't make sense. In addition, people will not be aware about how to come back from the calamity. And there is a reason that that is taking place. And it has a lot to do with the destruction of the old paradigm. When I talk about the destruction of the old paradigm, the example parts are like the change in the educational system and what the younger generation is taught. Destruction to the old paradigm. People's general awareness about what real wealth is. Those are things that sustain one's life. It's not shoes and clothes and different things like that. See, the mindset of the people have changed in the shift between the old paradigm and the new paradigm. So when this sudden and abrupt destiny manifests, people will not know how to handle or deal with the soul-shaking experience that is scheduled to come. The question is, why is the soul-shaking experience scheduled to come? Well, what we really have to do is look back to another one of those periods in which Uranus entered Taurus. And that's in the during 1851, I do believe it was, when the American Revolution took place, when the Industrial Revolution took place. We have to look back at that period. And we're looking back at that period in order to understand what actually took place. Why would the elitists destabilize the whole country, and therefore the whole world? It was so that they could what? Create a new renaissance. The same thing is occurring now. Before I talk about what is to be for our current time period, I need to go back and talk about that time period when things were destabilized in the in the 1900s. In the 1900s, how can I cover this? How can I cover this? I'll cover it like this. New chapter. The rapture of the Great Depression. The rapture of the Great Depression. Remember who was raptured during the Great Depression. It wasn't the basic layman and woman. No, they had been stonewalled. The people that were raptured during the Great Depression were those elitists, those privileged people, those people with a level of a higher intellectual capacity that were educated. Those people were raptured into financial, social, and political security. And so I want to talk about that period, so, like kind of around or between the periods of 1929 to 1939. Did you know that during the Depression, when people were homeless, without food, clothes, shelter, an increasing number of substance abusers, that those elitists were moving forward and commencing with or initiating major deals. One of the deals of that time was the funding and building of the Empire State Building. Did you know that? Prime Realty. Let's see. During that time period of the Great Depression, it cost over 40, I might say it was very close to $41 million to build the Empire State Building during that time. Another thing that took place was the Empire State Building housed other influential people. It housed, I don't even know how to pronounce it. I was supposed to type it down. I'll spell it. Schenley. Schenley Products Company G. And it was the largest domesticated liquor sales of that time period. Why do I bring this liquor company up? This Schenley was working with the same people that funded and built the Empire State Building. His name, the person that built the Empire State Building, was Lawrence Wynn. Well, Lawrence Wynn allows Schenley to have residence in the Empire State Building. All of this is during the time of the Depression, when there's people on the street starving, hungry, homeless, killing themselves, overindulging in substance abuse, etc., etc. Well, the laymen and women were going through heart-wrenching, soul-crushing life experiences. The rich were setting themselves up to get richer. Anyway, why is this Schenley person and his company, his liquor company, important? Because understand that, remember, during the Great Depression, that economic and social collapse was intentionally planned and executed in order to make way for affluent people to secure their seats of power and their economic power. This Schenley person and his company was no different. Schenley was a top-selling liquor company back then. But after the transition is what I'm trying to get to. During the period of the Great Depression, during that whole transition, Schenley set itself up for increased wealth that was spanned across generations. Schenley products, after that period, moved to include Seagram's. does it say? Distilled, I don't know what that say, but it includes Seagram's. Hiram, distilled Hiram, Walker. Oh, is that the Canadian whiskey? Wait a minute. Yeah, the Canadian whiskey. Even the Canadian whiskey. But it didn't just stop. You got to remember, these were the most influential, the most intellectual, and the most privileged people of that time. They came together, remember, like a rat king, intertwining coast to coast to gridlock the whole industrial, I'll say, world, United States complex. It was a purpose. They were setting themselves up for future, for longevity. And so this Schenley person, remember, in short, and it wasn't the only company though, expanded from Schenley's to Seagram's and other well-known liquor labels known even today. It branched off. Schenley's is also directly related to the Canadian Club, which is another major Canadian club whiskey, another liquor establishment, stemming from the same founder. And not only that, then there was, I see, Hiram Walker of the Detroit Canadian prime stocks. Yeah. And they had all the stocks when I got here. Anyway, what I was trying to get to is try to see how to order the notes. But they marketed, they cornered the market in every industry, every single industry during this economic collapse. This, the Empire State Building, the people that created it and funded it, as well as this Schenley, this company, liquor company that branched off into different well-known liquor brands like Seagram's and Canadian Club whiskey, also were directly linked to where I'm from, the Detroit newspaper. They bought out the Detroit newspaper. I really don't know what other companies that benefited from, like, the Great Depression. Well, we just, like, for instance, Sears and Roebuck. Sears and Roebuck, if you've ever shopped there, you know, have their own brands. Well, that was a time period in which they were able to diversify in the 1930s. Sears and Roebuck diversified and added to their, I'll say, catalog. Okay, here you go. This Allstate Insurance Company. Allstate Insurance Company. Sears and Roebuck also had the brands of, or patent the brands of Kenmore, Craftsman, Die Hard, Silvertone, Supertone, Tough Skins. Those are just a few examples of the, what do you call it, of the areas that were expanded. Let me try to summarize what I just said, because I don't have a lot of order. What was I just saying? What I was saying is that during the 1930s, the Great Depression took place. And the Great Depression lasted about 10 years. The Great Depression was a plan that was well thought out. And the plan was actually the same layout of the game Monopoly. But in order for the elitists to ensure that they didn't face any resistance during this upgrade, because remember, Uranus is upgrading, they had to drought out the laymen and women. They had to drought them out. That goes back into that that chance card monopoly. Don't pass go directly to jail. Do not collect $200. Droughted them out. Locked them out. Stonewalled them. These people could not buy. They could not invest. They couldn't even get the money to feed themselves while this transition went on. They could not take the chance that people would realize what was going on and pose any form of resistance. They blocked them people out. So what all them people during that time period going through their hardship, these very rich and powerful, influential and educated people are moving forward and reorganizing the various industries that have, I'll just say, made life easier for man. They are cornering the markets when it came to the literally markets and the commodities, and they cornered everything. They established new corporations, and even the Golden State Bridge was a part of this. I'm talking about, it goes so deep. My research went so deep. It included major bridges. The Golden State Bridges is one example I can remember off the top of my head. That these bridges were intricately planned to get traffic to come to different parts of the country. And each part of the country had its, I'll say, its own unique own unique hey, when I forget, I'll say a highlight. It had its own unique highlight. So like the Golden Gate Bridge led people to a particular highlight. It was for a reason. And when the people got there, there were certain things there for them to be consumers of. That kind of thing. All of it was intentional. Every bridge was it was something else. It was the bridges. It was the major corporations. It was the banks. The banks were established. And banks also connected themselves with different realtors. The whole point is the elite, the people of power, shut everybody else out so they could reorganize the economy in order to ensure that their bloodline stayed in those seats of power. Basically, the rest of the Uranus transits into Taurus historically were about colonization, redistribution of territory, wars in order to force the distribution of territory, the imposing of taxes and different things like that. It is the coming together, remember Uranus and Taurus, the coming together of the most influential minds to bring in the most updated technology and scientific breakthroughs and medicine breakthroughs. Again, now, we are in that same period. We're under the same umbrella. So what am I saying? Let me try to sum this up. I'm saying now that Uranus is in Taurus, we are in the new paradigm. And the original date that the rapture commenced was May 16th, 2018. That's when people initially had the opportunity to be raptured up in the new paradigm, in the new way of earning wealth in life. That's what it is. Successfully transitioning from the old paradigm and a way of doing things and addressing one's ability to maintain I'll say a high maintenance lifestyle. Transitioning over there to that life. That energy was the rapture. And the rapture process will continue up until 2025. So the rapture was not like the church foretold of. It wasn't just in a blink of an eye. It didn't just happen at one point. It is a continuous process as people cross the bridge from the old paradigm to the new paradigm. Now, if a person is left behind, that other part of that religious message, it is because they did not transition from the old paradigm into the new paradigm, but got stuck in the old paradigm. just like those lay men and lay women did back during the Great Depression. And some other time I'll go into detail and talk about what it means to be left behind in the old paradigm, the old way of doing things, the old mindsets, the old understanding. That is going to have its bring about a unique set of life experiences for those people, and it won't be nice. Now that's what was foretold in the Bible, that to be left behind would not be nice. It's not going to be nice. The secret message is that by 2025, the world, but primary focus on the United States, is going to fall into the greatest depression that has yet to be known to man. And so it was some other stuff I can't remember. That's why I have to write notes. So you are forewarned, and therefore you are forearmed. Our time period now is quite similar to back as it was in the 1930s, where a lot of people work from paycheck to paycheck, so they don't have enough to stock up for troubled times. But what you can really look around to see, if you need more evidence than what I've shared in this live stream, you can look around even here on YouTube and you see how a lot of people are leaving their $100,000+ homes, vacating them, selling them, abandoning them, in order to minimize their lives, to become minimalist. They are buying old school buses and shuttles and whatever, canisters, whatever they can, and they are renovating them into small homes, etc., etc. Another thing that is becoming more popular are actually small homes, but they're also becoming more popular are the smaller sale cars, like the sale cars. And all of this is because those that have a higher level of intellect see that there is shifts happening in the markets, in the commodity markets. They're seeing shifts happen in every market, in every work area of life. There are major shifts happening, and because these people work up close and personal in a particular department, they're seeing major changes that are showing them from their perspective that area or that business cannot sustain itself. It cannot continue to sustain itself. And so it's been like a subconscious message to many people. And those that do have acquired enough in their life are now taking what they acquired to do what? Buy doomsday bunkers and different things like that. Now I know that this message sounds like what they call the fear porn or negative thinking, but all of the information that I've read over, some of which I didn't share here, reveals between astrology, referring back to history, what is currently going on now, that this particular time period is coming in which you will either be raptured safely into the new paradigm, or you will be left behind. To be left behind suggests what? Just like the people in the 1930s, you will face tremendous economic hardship. Even in the Bible, it's a scripture that talks about in the final days, and I don't think it's the end of the world final days, but in a particular day, but it's in the Bible in the final days, that so much wheat will be worth denarius or whatever. But it was just saying it's going to be very expensive to buy food, and that there will also be food shortages in the final days. The food shortages lead to the higher prices. Not only that, this new immigration stuff that is taking place, sending Mexican people back across the border. Therefore, there are less workers to get the job done, are running the prices of food up. And I point that out because through that, you can see that um, that crash or the inflation, I'll say the food, is intentional. If certain works are not done, then the inflation would not happen. Um, Another thing we can look at, these are things that's very common, is we can look at the real estate and what do you call it? Financing. Is that people were refinancing their houses over the last, I'm gonna say, 10 years. People lost their houses to inflated. How are you doing? I'm fine. How you doing, SG? What's going on with you? I'm in here delivering my little secret message, and I need to find my other notes because it's other information. But I was just trying to give some preliminary information in short to let you ladies and gentlemen know whoever views that um, we are in a position that we will be suffering this truly economic hardship that is like equivalent or greater than the Great Depression, and to beware. And I was talking about how people are downsizing. People are becoming doomsday preppers. Now, people do these kind of things for different reasons. Some people are up on it. I believe that those that are like, we could say they aren't on an elitist level, so they might be higher upper, we could say higher upper middle class, making a few million dollars a year. They can see from their perspective because they have a lot of investments in what's going on in this world. But if the elitists are shifting things, it is for the wealthiest in this world. And again, you got to remember that we're moving into a new paradigm, and that Uranus also is synonymous with technology and advancements and things like that. And so this shift that we're going through is going to drought everybody out financially, run you mad as far as, because that's a lot of stress. But the point of droughting a person out is so that they don't have the finances or the money to invest. I personally, and kind of rambling, think that initial Bitcoin stuff was a way to drought people's money out. Because it was what, 20,000, 40,000, and it dropped down to maybe $10,000, $9,000 or less. That wiped a lot of people's pockets out. Is that not what happened during the 1930s, dealing with commodities and things? You know what I'm saying? So all of these things is so much evidence, and astrology really helps us be able to organize and focus, and shows us where to look for the information and the clues to what's soon to take place, or is actually transpiring. The little engine is just starting to steam up. And I've shared in a couple of live streams ago, I shared that at first I believed that the stars were a message from God. And I still kind of do, but what I did learn over this last month is that man has used stars to hide information in. Because the information that I got this information from astrology. I was just doing my everyday basic studies, and I was like, oh my God, this is talking about a new Great Depression as we transition from this old paradigm into the new paradigm. And I kept interpreting the stars, and I say, hey, it's talking about people being raptured and left behind. And so I really start understanding where the churches get their terminology from and different things like that. This message that I got over the last month is not one that seems like it's from God, but it's that was shrouded in what do you call it? In cryptic form through the stars. So those that were in power, no matter where they are in the world, they can tap in to the blueprint, the plan, the layout at any given time, and it can never be intercepted. See, we're in a time period of the greatest deception for real known to man ever. And so when I was reading the stars, it just started to uncover it. And and as I did my research, and I was finding out what was actually taking place with those that still had the money, the know-how, and the intellect, while everybody else was starving to death, it made me understand, of course, in alignment with other things, that the same thing is taking place now. The real problem is that we are more superficial now, and we have more things to use to entertain ourselves and to try to escape reality than they did during the 1930s. And so people are preoccupied, and then there is another group of people that cannot handle this truth, and I guess would prefer that such a scenario, they just find themselves in a particular scenario, a very negative scenario, it will be a very dangerous scenario, than to know ahead of time and to move to do something about it. Can we move to do something if we are aware that there is going to be a Great Depression greater than the Depression of the 1930s? Is there something we can do when many of us are living from paycheck to paycheck? I have tried to share some answers along the way when I do my tarot reads. And some of the answers have been, hey, if you're in a relationship that is not serving you, if you don't feel love, no, it ain't about feel. If you know you're not loved, if you're not supported, if a person is abusive to you or critical of you, if you find yourself on a roller coaster ride, if you are consistently heartbroken and disappointed, you may very well want to move away from that relationship. Let it go. Because if we are moving into the greatest depression ever known to man, and there will be less jobs, or less opportunity for work, low wages, high inflation, food prices high, food shortages, and whatever else is taking place, and we are struggling to live like we never have before. That's not our that's not our norm. That's not our norm. And so we're going to be moved out of our norm of ease and that leonine energy of, entertainment and being fabulous all the time, into a soul-wrenching hardship. That alone is stressful. But then to be laying with the enemy during a time like that will be more detrimental than it ever has been. Can we make changes to help ease this time period I'm talking about, that we will know totally that we're in within the next 6 years? By July 2025, we will know. Yes, we can. And releasing those old, outdated, wore out, and abusive and toxic relationships is one of them. Because we don't want folks standing over us, willing to do us in for the little bread and butter that we have. Those kind of things. We don't want people to steal from us. We need people in our corner. Right now, the current astrological energy is talking about, hey, we are at this point in time where, let me stop. What am I talking about right now? See it? Oh, okay, Carl, you see it? All right, I got that. I can pronounce that. Thank you. Right now, I want to talk about the current astrological energy we are up under. Right now, it's saying that each of us have a primal instinct that is sparked. Whether it's the need to survive, I know that's mine, or if it's the need for love and connection and things like that. Feel free to research our primal instincts and primordial emotions and things like that. That's what the astrological energy is pointing to. That part of us, that hidden part of us, that we it's an innate part of us. It's in us. So we can't just uproot it and get rid of it. We have to be aware of it and work with it. So the astrological energies points that out. I'm going to use the example of a person that has this overwhelming need to survive. And it says the astrological energies talk about how a person's ambition, whatever they are doing, however they're using their vital life force energy, is all to try to satisfy that innate urge, that innate instinct. And keeping with the example, you survival. So using me as an example, if my primordial need or primal need is for survival, when I get up every day, everything I do is trying to satisfy that or pacify that. It also talked about how we who people in humanity have people in our lives that don't serve our goal. Keeping with the example, for me, is to, survive. That, satisfy that, pacify that. And so there are people that in my life that serve like a blockage or resistance to me, my sense of security and stability in this world. And it talks about how a person dealing with that kind of primordial urge is pushing those kind of people away with the intent of also partnering with those people that can be beneficial, people that a person can persuade to help them achieve their primordial goal, I'll say. It also talked about how a person's that primordial urge or desire that is driving us, like a driver that drives your application on your computer. I keep talking about that. That kind of drive is in us. That's what the primordial part does. The primal part does, it drives us. That many people got this front on, their mask that they're wearing, so that a person can't see their, we can say, desperation. Because when you start talking about the primordial energies of survival, that's a sense of desperation. It can be fueled by fear and different things like that. So a person's desperation, they shroud it, they try to shroud it. But because that desperation comes from so deep that it still seeps out and people can see it seeping, And I was bringing that up because I'm talking about we're entering into this time period that is projected, I'll say, to be a very difficult time. When I say difficult, I'm talking about in the physical, I'm talking about mentally, and I'm talking about spiritually. And so right now, that drive in us is initiated or sparked because on a subconscious level, we can feel the shift that is occurring from the old paradigm into the new paradigm. We can feel that shift, that something is going on. We can't put our hands on it, but most of us know we're not in the best standing to transcend or to be raptured up easily into what is called maybe the good life. Most of us know it's not the case. And we know that because many of us are doing what? Living paycheck to paycheck, different things like that. Anyway, I start rambling. I want to talk a little bit more about how can we prepare to deal with this highly demanding time period foretold of. A lot of us live a life of excess. I talked about it a little earlier how people are downsizing. Take the clue. Take the clue. People are downsizing. People are doomsday prepping. They're stocking up foods and canned goods and things like that. Because when the reality sets in, people are going to be wilding out. Wilding out. See, we are coming up in a time period in which we are, we don't know. It's not our norm to starve or to be hungry. But if you've ever not eaten a significant period of time, then you very well may have been introduced to a spirit that walks in the body. And I talked about it before because I experienced it before. And that spirit that walks in the body is one that can force a person to become accountable. Either you're going to be strong enough and you're going to be willing to face the inevitable possibility of death due to starvation, which is a slow, painful deterioration. This is how extreme it's supposed to get. Or a person, most of us don't have control. We don't have control of ourselves. We don't have control of our soul. Our soul. A high vibrating person cannot cannibalize another human being. We already cannibalized animals, so one more step ain't nothing for a lot of folk. And so, I keep forgetting. So, this time period can get, when I'm talking about the people that coming and preparing for a time such as this by becoming a minimalist. I was talking about how we are extravagant. We do a lot of shopping. We buy, well, many of us have many, especially women, pairs of shoes. I got tons of shoes too. Tons and tons and tons of shoes. It's like pull back. Start to set your money aside. This is why you're hearing people talk about it's time to buy into precious metals, natural resources, because it's only the natural resources that can sustain your life. It's only the natural resources that will not, what they call it, depreciate. Only those will hold their value. And so you hear people saying buy gold, buy silver, buy this, buy that. It's because what? Those natural resources can be used one way or another to sustain your life. And so when the time period comes that this greatest depression ever known to man occurs, and the people cannot get food, the bare necessities that keep them from being savage, and partaking in things like cannibalism and things like that, these people, everybody gonna be insane. Are going to be insane. And this is the kind of thing that all the information that I'm looking at from the astrology, the historical references, everything that I've looked at, and I talked about the astrology because that's what sparked this. Point to this extreme experience, and it's going to be hard. So what am I saying? It's time to become a minimalist, live more simply. A lot of people are going natural. See, we jump on the trends many times. We jump on trends because, it's trending, it's cool, it's acceptable. But a lot of people are going natural, like the black culture going more natural. And the initial people weren't going natural just because, they wanted to trend something or be a trendsetter. No, they were going natural because they are seeing something bigger than like the norm. They're seeing something bigger than the norm. They're seeing, is talking black women's hair. This is how much all of this stuff covers. Black women's hair. Black women's hair is some of the most high maintenance hair that I've ever come across. And if we were to hit such difficulties, and the economy collapses to the point where you can barely eat, but then you won't be getting your hair done. And our hair, although different courses and things can really look messed up, it is really messed up unless you go natural. If you go natural, then your hair begins to getting tamed and laid down, and it begins to respond to more natural hairstyles than what pressing and perming and doing all those things. That's why these sister locks and all these kind of things are coming back, going back to the basics or the more primal responses or natural responses to life and to nature. That's why it's occurring. That's why people are becoming minimalist. That's why people are quitting their jobs and pursuing their own interest. They are preparing for this time period. And again, remember, every field, every industry that exists in this physical world is one that in some form or fashion refines a natural resource in order to give to sell to us. So these industries extract and refine and then sell to us. So what am I saying? A person in any given industry, especially higher up in the industry, becomes aware just by that which comes across their desk what is to take place. A person, again, can see possibly, depending on what it is, that this here can't, whatever it is they're over, whatever it is that they push the buttons on day after day and for years, this system cannot sustain itself. And they can see that that part collapses. And upon pondering, if what they're over collapses, everything else might be riding on the back or dependent on it, which means the whole system falls. So this is how these people are deciding to, make these major life shifts and changes. And I was talking about how the natural urge to eat, you have to eat and drink to urinate and defecate. are going to continue to occur as long as a person is alive. So even if a person going through it, even if it's nothing but 4 or 5 weeks, you know, I'll say 3 to 4 weeks, and they starving, people are going to do whatever they can do to satisfy these grand urges, these urges, including what I was talking about, cannibalism. And so the doomsday preppers are aware of that. That's why the original doomsday preppers start prepping, understanding that people are not going to have food, and that people are going to be more violent and, again, savage, barbaric than has been in many centuries. You know, people are going to be that barbaric. And so they're setting up to protect them and their family. And again, people's awareness are coming from different angles. I'm in this live stream because I've been on here longer than I had anticipated, and I didn't even deliver the whole message because I didn't sit up and draw the outline like I should have. But I just want to reiterate why I made this particular live stream. It is because when I was studying the stars, this is the message that I seen in the astrological alignments. And I just saying, at that time, I realized that man has encoded information, has hid or shrouded or stored information by encoding messages based on the astrological alignments. That is a perfect avenue for a person in any part of the world to be able to look up to the sky and be able to decipher the message. There's no interception. I bring that back up because, remember, I thought that the stars are the book of life, which I still do believe in, because some of the messages that come through speak from like it is written by a divine force. This time, the message was not written by a divine force. The language was somewhat different. The tone was different. And the message was that I felt like I was deciphering a message from man. And it was saying, hey, the time is drawing near. Whatever you're going to invest in as far as this new paradigm, it's time to initiate it. It's time to begin, sooner, very soon to, they're already laying the foundation. We see the foundation being laid with different advancements in medicine and in the medical field, and I mean just everything. I talk about the school educational system, how it's set up. They're introducing cryptocurrency, even the cryptocurrency, that Bitcoin machine is around the block from my house at the gas station where I can buy it right there. And so they are ushering these things in, and these things that cryptocurrency machine around the block at my little local gas station is what Uranus and Taurus embodies. It is a manifestation here. Taurus is physical. You know what I'm saying? It's money. Those kind of things is resources. It can either, if I was to buy in that cryptocurrency, even though this is the preliminary time period, it can do what? It can help pacify my physical, worldly wants, needs, and or desires one way or another. And so it's right there. That's the manifestation. When astrological, when Uranus moves into Gemini, which is the next sign, remember Gemini represents the change. Your reality itself is forever changed at that time, and that begins in what, 2026, 2020. Wait a minute. 2025, because that will be July 8th, 2025. It's going to go into Gemini and say, they're going to say, see the changes to your reality and the impact it's having upon your mindset and your social exchanges and how y'all relate to each other. That's what it's going to say when it initially goes into Gemini. Then it's going to back up and come back in here to Taurus and have us look at all this stuff so we can see clearly where we're going, so it won't be no explanation. By then, we're going to start understanding the effects things are having on our reality and on the people. And then it's going to go back into Gemini. our reality. And I'm going to say this and then I'm going to let it go. Last night I was watching TV because I visited a friend. And I don't watch just regular TV. I be here online and on the YouTube and stuff. But so I'm over their house and they have TV. They're watching basic standard TV. And I was really paying attention to like the programming itself. And so I was focusing on the commercials because the same commercials kept coming on over and over again. I don't know what the hell. And so I stopped and paid attention. And all those commercials did work. One commercial was about visiting a dating site or calling a dating thing. I'm like, okay, we don't meet people outside anymore. Okay, that's part of the new paradigm. You can call somebody up. Okay, I'll let that one slide. But the rest of the commercials were either advertisement of a movie that was scheduled to come on. But the bulk of the commercials were this. It was all about like Class A lawsuits to something that has been invented or created in this physical world that was supposed to service mankind, and it backfired, and now people have been sick or dying. An example of these creations have been it was like I think Johnson & Johnson baby powder. It was this hip replacement ball joint thing. It was the hernia mash. It was the Roundup spray. People sprayed and got cancer. And the last one I can remember, it was something about a diabetic medicine that they had prescribed to people. And as a result of taking this prescribed diabetic medicine, it led people to have their genitals amputated. I ain't never heard of such a thing. Genitals amputated. Only time I ever heard of a genital being amputated was doing from a Lorena Bobbin, that the bobbin is our man's, phallus. That's the only time I ever heard of that. And so why do I bring that up? That is because those things were like, how can I say, they were those enlightened through Uranus. They were these enlightened, ingenious discoveries and creations that were manufactured and distributed or sold to the populace, that was supposed to help their lives go easier, but instead was detrimental to them. And so like I was saying about Uranus being in Aries and then moving into Taurus, remember when it moved back in Taurus to say, are you sure that you want to keep these creations in your world? Because it's going to be residual effects. Keeping with one of the examples I gave, okay, you created this diabetic medication. Did you do some lab testing on this diabetic medication? Are you sure you want to sell this to people? Are you sure it's going to help these people in humanity? Okay, I'm sure the real answer behind the scenes was no, that wasn't the right thing. But money, what is called capitalism, they put it out here. And as a direct result, people had to have the genitals amputated in reality with that Uranus and Taurus in reality when it manifests. You know what I'm saying? And then, like I said, Uranus is going to move in Gemini, in which we can openly walk out our door and see the changes to our reality, into ourselves, into our mindsets, and how we interact and have exchanges with others. We are moving truly into this deep time. Can I call? Okay. I thought that was something new. Anyway, I thank you for dropping by here at Can Angels Fly Tarot and More and receiving this secret message. If you can't take nothing else from it, if it's too confusing, all I ask you to do is prepare for the world's greatest depression ever known to man. This greatest depression is right around the block. It's within 6 years. So do prepare. You can prepare by doing what? Releasing those toxic relationships, whatever toxic relationship exists. You can do so by becoming a minimalist. And, my mom said you should always live just a little bit below your means. But in light of this, live considerably below your means. You know, don't buy them extra shoes. Stack up your cash. Buy, again, those commodities like gold and things like that that can save you, save your life. Another thing is to start to buy canned goods and different things like that and stack up. I'm not going to go. I have a video out here called Doomsday Prepping. And then I have another one called Your Ass is Grass Due to the World's Greatest Pyramid Scheme, where I go in more detail back then. And back then, I saw, but I ain't see fully what I see now. And the whole point is to understand all of this stuff that's taking place politically is just games. It's a part of the deception. And so all the rallies and protests and things like that, based on what I'm seeing, it's not going to work. Another thing, if you can, if I could, I would really move out the city. I would not want to be in the city when things get tight. You know, it's already tight in the city. But if you can, you know, get you a piece of land. I was watching a video earlier today here on YouTube where a person reported, and I can't vouch for them, but they were reporting that it's a like a notice going around. I'm talking about in the real estate area, to not sell. You know, they refer to it as raw property or raw land to certain cultures. I was like, wow, that's some deep stuff. And then the prices are going to skyrocket again. It's about blocking people out from making any moves that would be resistant to this renovation that is taking place. And the renovation is to what? Into the new paradigm. Hopefully that made sense and you got a little something from it. If I find my other notes, I'll fill you in on them. Fill you in on anything else later on. Now this particular live stream, I'm only going to leave up 24 hours and then I'm going to make it private, and I'm going to review it to see if it's sufficient enough, that I deliver the right message or I just left too much out. If it's sufficient to deliver the secret message, then I'm going to invite certain people that may not have seen me go live tonight to come in and view it. Anywho, y'all have a wonderful rest of the night.